One of the biggest things is the tax cuts, and
Yes.
if you go back to Ronald Reagan first coming in, in 1979, interest rates were 21%. I mean, if you can imagine that,
My dad reminds me of that all the time.
Getting a house, your interest rate for your mortgage was in the 20s. It's stunning, or high teens. How we actually survived that, I don't know. Ronald Reagan came in and recognized that there's some things that had to be done. First of all, government needed to get back off. We needed to reduce the tax rates and put more money in the pockets of the people who earn it. And that's precisely what this did, because there were a number of tax cuts that came in under the Trump years that were about to expire.
You're watching On the Issues with Chris and Mike, a speakeasy conversation brought to you by CooleyConservatives.com.
Mike Huebsch,
Chris Muller.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Commissioner. Welcome back to the speakeasy.
Thank you. Guy couldn't hold a job.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
You're bouncing around all over the place.
Exactly.
Tell me about that. That's how we would ask it in a job interview.
Right. Well, eventually the governor thought he might find a job I could do. But right.
Eventually we all find our way, right?
Exactly.
But thank you for coming back to the speakeasy.
Yeah.
It has been a long time since we had our speakeasy.
Yeah,
I know
2 months.
July was kind of a day where we decided to take off. We were doing family things, we were vacations, and honestly, work got a little busy. I know for probably you as well as me.
Absolutely. July is a busy month. So.
Yeah, July is definitely busy, and I'm
not
going
like
to
we
see
get
if
a lot
this
of
camera.
Not like we get a lot of Julys in this state.
Right.
The kind of weather and months.
Embrace them while we have them.
Take summer while you got it. So yep.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we were at a very interesting event today.
It was a great day.
Top of the list, top of mind, fresh in our memories. The Vice President JD Vance. I should probably say we are here in our On the Issues with Mike and Chris.
Chris and Mike.
Chris and Mike. I'm sorry.
Yep. You need top billing.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. But this is On the Issues, and we're going to get back to doing a regular cadence of these so we don't get out of practice as bad as we are.
Right.
But anyway, like I was saying, the top of the list, the hottest topic, Vice President JD Vance was in town today. He gave a really great speech in La Crosse at the, Mid-City Steel Fabricators.
Yes.
What was your experience there? I know you had a pretty good seat up front.
Yeah, I was, fortunately, I got to be in the second row. It was, I thought it outstanding. And our Secretary of Interior opened up the show.
Secretary Burgum from North Dakota or something?
Yeah, Governor of North Dakota.
Okay.
Yep. And I've always said Secretary of Interior is one of the nicest jobs, there is, because he gets to go all over the country and basically take care of our parks, natural resources, and things like that. What a great opportunity to just enjoy the country. But so he opened it up, and then JD Vance came out. And beforehand, I had an opportunity to interview with a couple of our local media outlets. And the question was, why is the Vice President here? What message do you hope to he takes away from Western Wisconsin, that type of thing. And I said, as a rabid defender of the Electoral College, here's a good reason, once again, for us holding on to the Electoral College, because there is no way in the world JD Vance is in La Crosse today if we have the popular vote.
That is a great point.
Not a chance. So
there's no reason for any president or vice president to come to this region if all they have to do is get a majority of votes out of Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., New York City,
there's 15
et
cities.
cetera.
Yeah, there's 15 cities that basically decide the president. And by the way, Minneapolis isn't one of them. So we don't see anybody up here. Chicago, that's as close as
that's a great point.
So, it was important for us I think in the small states, and this is what always blows me away is, the Democrats always talk about election reform, redistricting reform, whatever it is when they're losing. I mean, that's the only time we hear from it. And certainly they are in hyper mode on the Electoral College right now. And Democrats in Wisconsin who defend or who oppose the Electoral College, it kind of goes back to the whole, it's kind of like a chicken defending Colonel Sanders. I mean, what do you think? It's just, there's nothing there that's going to be good for Wisconsin.
Exactly.
I don't get it. And again, we are the United States of America, not the United People of America.
Well
So
said.
we need to have that demarcation. That being said, that's why the vice president was here. As we've had before, where we had Governor Bush, who then became president, come to Wisconsin. We had Vice President Cheney come to La Crosse. We had Vice President Dan Quayle in La Crosse. I mean, we've had all of those things. In 1960, we had John Kennedy, Senator John Kennedy, in La Crosse at the Mary E. Sawyer Auditorium. I mean, we continue to be a focal point, and it's because we, not only is the Electoral College give Wisconsin a real advantage as far as being on the playing field, but we're also a terrific cross section of what America thinks.
Exactly.
And that's and so the message that I told the media that I think JD Vance needs to come away with, and I think he really did come away with it, was that it's going back to the 92 election. It's the economy, stupid. I mean, we need to make sure that as we go into 2026 and we go into the midterms, that the economy is strong. The media and everybody will love to tell us that the tariffs aren't working. They've destroyed the economy, everything like that. Today, while JD Vance is in La Crosse, the stock market hit its highest number in history. I mean, you just see the economy moving forward. And JD Vance did a great way of describing why the tariffs are necessary.
Yeah.
And how essential they've become.
And that's the thing. I wanted to focus on that a little bit too. I think let's kind of go deeper on that.
Yeah.
His presentation, his ability, man, I don't know how else to put it other than just like, he's just so smart, so articulate, and so down to earth, all at the same time.
Right.
That is a very unique talent, to be able to be like super, super smart and relatable to the people.
Yep.
I love this guy.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And that was the other thing. He said, "What do you think of the vice president?" And I said, I'll be honest with you. About a year and a half ago, I hadn't really heard of JD Vance. I heard that there was a senator out there, JD Vance. Today, I see presidential timber. I mean, a vice president, a lieutenant governor, their only job is to wait for the guy or the chief to die. That's really their only job. And so a vice president can either be a partner, as I think President Trump has brought in JD Vance to be, or can be a subservient sycophant saying, "Oh, you're so wonderful," or can be just relegated to nowhere, which is where Kamala Harris was in the last.
Go to the funerals, go to the dinners.
You're a problem for us, and so we need to push you.
Yeah, just like an accessory or something.
Exactly. So I think we have a situation where JD Vance, after today's speech, and certainly I'm watching him for the last month, he could step in and be president at any given moment. And I'm certain that he will be the Republican nominee come 2028.
I think you're probably right. I think a DeSantis could give him a good run, but man, oh man, do I like this JD Vance guy.
Yeah, I agree.
I told Diane, be careful, because if he's running for president, I might quit my job and go work where I like him a lot. I mean, he is just so relatable, so down to earth. And like, I was even talking about it with my brother. It's almost like he grew up in our hometown.
Right.
It's like the same kind of like rural upbringing that we went through. Yeah. And I mean, he's just an everyman. And super smart. It's amazing what I mean, he didn't once look at a teleprompter.
Nope. I said to my son, Ryan and I were both there, and I said to him, I bet he's given that speech a few times, because it was very smooth. It was
very smooth.
But it sounded like it was, stream of consciousness. Yeah. This is what I'm thinking right now. And it had the two words that we just do not hear from the Democratic leadership at all, and that's just common sense. I mean, Democratic leadership, I was talking with some of the folks that were there, and I said, it is stunning to me to watch the Democratic leadership. I'm not going to say, the regular people who say that the Democrats have lost their mind.
It's their upper echelons that are the nutcases.
Their leadership has completely lost their mind, and almost in a self-destructive way, which I don't understand. I mean, I've never really seen anything like this. It's stunning for them to think that, 3 days ago in Minneapolis, where the DNC is meeting, one of their leaders said, we need to quit talking about crime and immigrants and all those type of things, because the American people don't care about those things. I'm like, wow, you have, what bubble do you live in? How out of touch can you possibly be?
Exactly.
When, again, today, the Washington, D.C. mayor said, boy, it's been pretty sweet to have the National Guard here cleaning up the city.
I saw that too, and I was like, is that for real?
Right. I know. So it's, the thing is that the things that Trump is doing are working.
Yeah.
And
Well, not only that, but I think that the way that Vice President Vance put it was really well said, and I'm probably going to destroy it. But he made that case about crime in Washington, D.C., very similar to what you said. But then he said, now, wouldn't it be nice if the Democrats would come on board and also help us with this kind of stuff?
Right.
Why do they keep fighting? Why do they want more murders? Why do they want more crime?
Yeah.
Just because they hate Trump? It's so stupid.
That's all they, I mean, that's their entire survival. And, we both listened to a podcast recently from, I can't remember her name, Lindy. I can't remember what.
Lindy Lee.
That was it. Lindy
Yeah,
Lee.
on Sean Ryan's podcast.
Yes.
So hat tip to him.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. Fantastic. But she was a longtime advocate for the Biden administration and worked in the administration work.
Well, she's good friends with the Biden family.
Yeah, absolutely. But she said, they've so completely lost touch with what real Americans are dealing with and what is important to real Americans that they can't even speak to that language anymore. And she said, unless they really kind of figure this out, they're going to be in the wilderness for a very long time.
And that actually goes right into the conversation I had with some of the protesters today after the event. And I was walking back to my truck, and there was a group of protesters there, and it was almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And it got to the point, we had a really good conversation eventually, but initially it was like, okay, my talking points, your talking points, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But eventually we got down to really talking about it, and I brought up to them, and I said, what kind of concerns me more than anything else is that we're talking the same language. It's almost like the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
We're talking the same language, but we have completely different definitions for these things.
Right.
I mean, they're talking about human rights. I'm like, I totally agree with human rights.
Right.
Let's have human rights.
Yep.
But how do you define them?
Yeah.
Is how I define them very differently. I'm like, we have a Bill of Rights. What part of the Bill of Rights? Second Amendment's part of that too.
Yep.
And they're like, oh no.
Yeah, right. Well,
but it's like we have very different definitions. And that's what bothers me most, because we just keep talking past each other.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, it's the philosophy that you come into issues with. I mean, the drastic difference between the parties, and people are always like, there's no difference between the parties, Republicans, Democrats, it's the uniparty, all this kind of stuff. And that's simply not true. There is a fundamental difference that is the base of governing philosophy. The Democrats honestly believe that they can solve almost every issue that we have with more government, with the right people in government, with the authority determining how things are going to move forward and how that's going to be determined. Republicans are exactly the opposite. Individual responsibility, personal accountability, those type of things. That basic fundamental dichotomy is why, I talked about the Huebsch observations on government before, and one of them is that that I say that is let me see if I can find it here real quick. Oh yeah, here we go. Democrats define democracy as a large centralized system of government that has ever expanding influence and control. That's democracy. That's the people voting for the right people to be in government. Thus, Donald Trump and Republicans, who in fact want smaller government and personal responsibility, are in fact an existential threat to democracy. We are in their minds. Of course,
that's a great point.
Because I'm wondering, how in the world can you, with a straight face, say that we are in any way an existential threat to democracy? Well, when you define it, and as Lindy Lou said, this is their religion.
Good point.
Yeah, when you come after their religion, we see the results of that. And so that's I think the biggest problem that, and one of the biggest divisions that we have in our country right now is simply how we come at it philosophically on the issues.
Fundamental difference in opinion. It's a big deal.
Yep.
And I even told them that, I mentioned this on the podcast either this week or the last week. I'm concerned because we're in this impasse. And I think you said something that was really interesting too. So I shouldn't be as concerned, but I am concerned that it feels like we're repeating history. It feels like we're repeating history all over again. And I reminded them of the history lessons that I took real history. They took 1619 history. Yeah, right. And that was another conversation that I won't even get into right now. Right. But I said, the history that I've studied, it was the Southern Democrat slave owners who refused to follow the Republican laws to free the slaves.
Correct.
That started the Civil War.
Yes.
It feels almost exactly the same thing right now. Yep. We have Democrats refusing to follow immigration laws
Right.
Federal immigration laws. They refuse to follow them.
Right.
What's going to happen? I mean, I'm like, these people got to be careful of where, because they are on the same path that the Southern Democrat slave owners were in the 1800s.
No question.
Am I crazy?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we even have judges. Hannah Dugan here in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin. I mean, she is going to be tried on whether or not she broke federal law in trying to usher an illegal alien outside of her courtroom through
total violation of federal law. Yeah,
absolutely.
Good point.
And the question will be whether or not, federal judge Lynn Edelman, the most liberal judge in the country, whether or not he lets her off. If not, and at this point it's 50-50, I think, but if not, there will be finally some recognition of the fact that we are going to follow the rule of law. I mean, this is the other thing. One of the things I always say about another observation of government is any government official who is screaming about how horrible something is and how something needs to be changed is doing that thing or has done that thing.
They project.
Absolutely. And so it's the rule of law. Well, we can't have the rule of, we can't go away from the rule of law. We absolutely have to have the rule of law. Well, right now in Wisconsin, we have the rule of 4. We have 4 Democrat liberal justices who are basically making up law and in fact, basically taking all of the laws that we have and just turning their back on them.
Yeah.
I mean,
boy, did I almost make their heads explode today, the protesters, when I told them, because they were talking about Trump and being a felon and a convicted felon and blah, blah, blah. Yep. And I said, yeah, but those weren't real laws that they put against him. Right. That was lawfare. That was judicial oligarchs, little kings and queens in black robes who just decided they were going to make this a law. They were going to make this, conviction.
Yeah.
And I said, that's another one of my concerns to them. And they just about lost their mind. You guys hate democracy. Oh, no, we want checks and balances the way the Constitution was written.
Right.
The legislature does the legislature. The executive does the executive, and the judicial branch does the judicial branch.
Right.
And we've talked about this before. Federalist number 78, they were very clear, the founding fathers, how dangerous it would be if the judicial branch combined or usurped the power of another.
Right. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The tyranny of the judiciary. That's what Hamilton talked about, was the tyranny of the judiciary. And that's exactly what we're facing right now. And it's happening at the local levels. It's happening.
Exactly.
It's happening in the
It's like trickling out.
Right. Right. It's coming from the ground up. And it goes back to the whole, and I hate to continue to keep going back to my observations on government, but I have one on that too. So why not?
Awesome. Let's hear that one too.
It's, let's see. Oh yeah. There is no rule of law nor judicial ethic that stands in the way of liberal justices from interpreting a law the way they want it to be rather than the way the law is written.
Exactly.
And when you consider, I mean, people talk about how difficult it is for a law to be made. And I was like, that's exactly what the founding fathers had in mind. You have to have the majority of both houses agree on something and then have a statewide elected or nationally elected individual sign that bill into law. That was supposed to be very, very difficult.
Yeah. And amendments to the Constitution are the same way. They wanted it to be difficult so that you really want this in the country. Right. All of us.
Exactly. And in Wisconsin, especially, the legislature is supposed to be the only one. They're supposed to be the most powerful one because they're the most diverse and widest body.
And the closest to the people.
Correct. They're the only ones that can introduce constitutional amendments in the state. The governor can't. The judiciary can't. The judiciary can strike down these constitutional amendments, and they're doing it.
But can they?
Well, no. They can strike down the interpretation in the law that governs those constitutional amendments. So you're right.
The reason I bring that up is because I signed on with Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty to be the one of the interveners, I think they call it, for if this ends up coming, if they're going to attack our congressional maps.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because it is not the role of the judiciary to create the maps.
Definitely not.
They have no role in that at all. None. It's the legislature who does the maps. And I'm adamant about that. And I, in the conversation with WILL, Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty, we call him Will.
Will. Yep.
Everyone says, Will who?
Yeah. No, it's Will. Right.
But I signed on with them because I said, you guys are using the same arguments that it's got to be about checks and balances.
Yep. Absolutely.
But your stuff is right on too, man. When are you going to write that book?
Oh, I don't know. I keep adding to it. That's the problem. I started with like 8.
Well, you could have a multi-edition, like an encyclopedia.
I know. I don't know, but it is interesting that we continue to see this struggle between, it goes back to the other thing that I always say is that when Republicans are elected to the bench, they become judges. When Democrats and liberals are elected to the bench, they stay Democrats and liberals.
They're activists.
They're activists. And that is a real problem, and it's a real concern. So going back to your question about, well, he's a convicted felon. No, he's not. He was convicted by a court that is invalid. That is, just frankly corrupt. When you're politically corrupt as a judge, your decisions should count. And what bugs me is that there is no accountability nor penalty for judges.
That's a good point.
Just go out and say, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to overturn this, and or say that this isn't right, and then they get overturned at a higher court. Nothing happens to them.
Yeah.
It's like you have been so blatantly politically corrupt that you've ruled this way, and doggone it, we're going to overturn it. That's it.
That you just reminded me, I think it was this week that I heard, I believe it was Mark Levin talking about this case, one of the cases against Trump. And it was tossed, I think it was the $500 million one.
Yeah.
But one of them that was tossed out, I think it was that one, but regardless, one of the judges originally used a dissent for his argument, for his justification of his ruling.
So a minority opinion.
A minority opinion,
right.
Yeah. This is not law.
Right.
This is, like, you said it perfectly. It's whatever they want it to be.
Yep.
They like the dissent, so they use the dissent to justify their arguments.
Right.
You can't do that in law.
Nope.
That's not law.
Right.
That's like me going to the opinion pages and just saying, oh, hey, yeah, this is the way we're going to do it. Go arrest that person because of this opinion page.
Yes, exactly.
You can't do that.
No, you can't.
And like I said, that's where we're in a really, that's why tensions are so high.
Yeah.
Because law doesn't matter anymore to some of these people.
Lawfare used to be called frivolous cases, because
they get tossed.
Yes, because we had judges. I mean, the only way that lawfare can actually work is a corrupt judge. It's the only way.
True.
And George Soros figured that out a long time ago and started putting DAs and judges at the local levels.
Yeah.
And so now any loony decision or a loony idea that comes in, a judge is going to say, well, this might have some validity. We should try this. No, it doesn't.
No.
And you know what? A judge, it goes back to what, when we did Act 10, and I think I've talked about this in the past, about how we had 12 cases against us. We lost 10 of those in Dane County. And on the 6th or 7th one, when I was speaker DOA secretary at the time, the media came and asked, well, what's going to happen? I said, well, we'll get to a real court and it'll get overturned.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are not real courts. A Dane County judge is not a real court.
Well, you said it very well before, and I know we're biased, obviously, but when Democrats become judges, they're still Democrats.
Totally.
They're activists.
Yep.
It's people like Schimmel, for example. Had he been elected, he's very, very much in the law.
Right.
He doesn't care about if it's right or left. I actually, when I sat with him at one of the events he was at, and we had a conversation about concealed carry, and he made some very good points. And he's like, but be careful that. How did he put it? Be careful, Muller. You don't want to overturn the laws or something, because he's very serious about the law.
Right.
Even if he's a big Second Amendment advocate,
yep,
he's still going to follow the law.
My favorite decisions that I see and hear and read is when the judge goes, this is bad. This is not right. This law is bad. However, that's what the law is. So I have no choice but to rule that way. I recommend that somebody go to the legislature and change this law because this is a bad law.
Yeah.
But at this point, I have no choice.
Because that's what the law is.
That will never come out of a liberal judge's mouth. Never, ever.
No, good point.
Yeah.
This is probably a good spot for us to take a break.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting to see little flags on here. I don't know what they mean.
Okay, sounds good.
This is Mr. Montgomery. I met him a few weeks ago in New York.
Oh, how are you? You live here?
Yes.
Well, maybe you know what a zombie is.
When a person dies and is buried, it seems there are certain voodoo priests who have the power to bring him back to life.
How horrible.
It's worse than horrible because a zombie has no will of his own. You see them sometimes walking around blindly with dead eyes, following orders, not knowing what they do, not caring.
You mean like Democrats?
All right, folks, welcome back. We took a little break there, had some technical difficulties, but we are back. I hope you enjoyed that Bob Hope video. So we're back. We were talking about the JD Vance visit to La Crosse earlier, and now let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. So the economic things that he talked about,
Yeah.
we were just talking off air about some of these really cool ideas that are going to help families, senior citizens, people really across the spectrum. What were the big highlights in your mind?
Well, this is clearly the big, beautiful bill tour. You know, he has been deployed, probably other cabinet secretaries have been deployed to make sure that Americans understand what the bill is about and why they did it.
Trying to get that adoption and everything across the country.
Right, exactly. I mean, the Democrats are coming out and saying, and certainly we've seen the billboards about Derek Van Orden saying he's raised electric prices, which, by the way, he can't. You know, that's a local issue. That's a Public Service Commission issue, so he can't do that. That he's cut health care for 11 million people. Well, what they don't say is that means illegal aliens.
Yep.
You know, that's one of the things that JD Vance was talking about, is that the Democrats seem to be more enamored with making sure that illegals get the health care that we've paid for than any of us.
He was really good on that topic. He mentioned that 2 or 3 times, like all this money that had been going to illegals belongs to the American people.
Precisely. Yeah, we paid for it.
Yeah.
So it's those type of things. But you know, one of the biggest things is the tax cuts, and if you go back to Ronald Reagan first coming in, you know, in 1979, interest rates were 21%. I mean, if you can imagine that, you know,
my dad reminds me of that all the time.
Getting a house, your interest rate for your mortgage was in the 20s. You know, it's stunning, or high teens. How we actually survived that, I don't know. Ronald Reagan came in and recognized that there's some things that had to be done. First of all, government needed to get back off. We needed to reduce the tax rates and put more money in the pockets of the people who earn it. And that's precisely what this did, because there were a number of tax cuts that came in under the Trump years that were about to expire. And had Kamala Harris been elected, she would allow those tax cuts to expire, and there would have been a huge tax increase.
Yep.
Which, again,
every one of us would have had a tax increase.
Absolutely.
Everyone.
No question. You take more money out of the economy to give to government, and it's less for our economy to grow. That's, again, another major difference between us and Democrats.
Yeah.
They think that job growth is when they make more government jobs, and they think that, you know, economic growth is when the government is able to spend more money.
And, you know, that argument came up today when I was talking to those protesters, and I said the difference between us, it's a pretty serious divide in this opinion. And it's the idea that it's my money. I'm the one who earned it. I should be the one to enjoy it. I should be the one to use it for my family.
Yep.
But on the flip side, they want to give it to the people who need it.
Right.
The people who haven't earned it, don't deserve it.
Right.
Just refuse to work for it for themselves. But they're so compassionate because they just want to give it to them.
Right.
And I think it was a few weeks ago, I tried to tell a little bit of a parable on the episode, where I said, you know, say a father and daughter get stranded on a deserted island, and the father does all the fishing for her, finds the water for her, and for weeks he's basically taking care of every one of her needs.
Right.
Suddenly he dies of a heart attack and he's gone. How is she going to fend for herself?
Right.
He didn't teach her how to fish. He didn't teach her how to find water.
Right.
That's not love. Giving somebody everything they need or want is not love.
No.
Real love is bringing them along, coaching them, teaching them to do it for themselves.
Right. It makes them reliant on you. And that's something that Democrats really enjoy.
They love the control.
Absolutely. Having people, you know, and they try to pass it off as compassion, and that's not.
It's not. It's the opposite.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole, you know, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach him to fish, he eats for his life.
Yeah.
It's simple, again, human nature.
And it's a fundamental philosophy, and we are completely different between us and the Democrats. And that, like I said, it's concerning. But again, these economic things that this bill does that help everybody. Another one that really caught my attention is, what did you call it? The depreciation.
Yeah, right. So we all can depreciate the costs of something. When a company purchases a piece of manufacturing equipment, they can depreciate the cost of the taxes on their taxes. So they can write that off of their taxes over a period of time. So you purchased $1 million product, you can depreciate 10% of it the first year.
A $2 million combine for a farmer.
Right, precisely. A tractor or anything along those lines. And so what they're saying is you can now take that off your taxes immediately. You know,
That's a big
I paid
deal.
for this. I'm not going to be taxed on it. And again, it goes back to, why are we taxing the means of production? You know, the materials that we need to produce things to grow our economy. Why would you also tax that? And so that's it, those things that go back to the fundamental difference. Because if you're able to purchase $1 million piece of equipment or a $2 million tractor, then you must be rich. And if you're rich, then we should have your money. You know, we need to confiscate more of it to provide for those who can't provide for themselves.
Yeah.
And that we will never teach how to do so.
And that's another good point too, is like what was it Reagan said? It's not that my liberal friends are so ignorant. It's that they know so much that isn't so.
Right.
It's like
Exactly.
they don't really understand these business concepts.
Right.
You know, for a farmer, like you said, let's use that analogy. A farmer buys a $2 million piece of equipment so that he can harvest even more of the crops and whatever he has to do. Right.
Right.
So they're not making $2 million on those crops.
No.
They're maybe making, let's just say they make $1 million.
Yeah.
Well, they still bought a $2 million combine to make $1 million.
Yep.
They're still in the hole $1 million.
Right.
You got to find another way to make the money to help pay for that thing. And over time, they will eventually. But
that's what they're planning on.
They're not making a lot of money.
Right.
It's profits and losses. And I mean, there's so much that goes into business.
Yeah.
People I think they cut past that.
Yeah.
They take the lazy way out. They're like, oh, you're rich, you must be evil. No.
Yeah.
They're creating jobs.
Right.
Like where do you think people go to work? They don't go to work for a poor person.
Nope.
They go to work for somebody who needs their skills to help benefit their business.
Idea that they came up with and they're pushing. Yeah.
Exactly.
I've said many times, Democrats rely on the fundamental lack of understanding of economics of the American people in order to go forward. The idea that we're going to tax the rich.
Hi, thanks for checking out this episode. If you like this content, then please visit cooleyconservatives.com and click the Buy Me a Coffee option to leave us a tip. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Truth Social. Oh, and you can get our content in your email inbox once a week by subscribing at cooleyconservatives.com. Thanks again. Take care and God bless. You're watching On the Issues with Chris and Mike, a speakeasy conversation brought to you by cooleyconservatives.com.
Welcome back, my friends. From this break, it was about a 2-day break.
Right, about a 48-hour break.
Yep. 48-hour break. We had a bit of technical difficulties, so sorry for the delay. The astute out there will notice we made a wardrobe changes too.
Yes.
So here we are back to talk about. Back into the conversation of the JD Vance visit and the One Big Beautiful Bill and all of the really great results for the economy.
Right.
We left off talking about the notes I took here. We talked about the tax reductions. We talked about the depreciation, and then just the idea of economic education in the area. You know, just people not having a really clear understanding of how the economy really works, how money really, you earn a salary because you have skills, kind of thing.
Yeah.
What more can we say about that?
Well, I mean, first of all, we had a big week in lacrosse. I mean, the vice president coming. We've obviously seen now the tariffs have been struck down by the judiciary. We may touch on that. But the biggest news, of course, is that Micah Parsons is coming to Packers. That's huge. That's something we got.
That's right.
But I mean, that's Reggie White quality. But it could be. This could be huge. But all right,
good call out. Thanks for bringing that up.
That's right. That's the biggest news of the week. So, vice president coming, that's cool and all, but Micah Parsons is coming. But
right on.
So, no, the big beautiful bill is the fact that so few are aware of it really kind of speaks to, and I've said it many times, the Democrats count on the ignorance, not stupidity, but ignorance. Just we aren't well educated on how the economy works. And the whole idea, I mean, the fact that then I think Vice President Joe Biden was able to say and get away with that paying taxes was your patriotic duty.
Oh, my Lord.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Absolutely
paying
ridiculous.
Taxes is a necessary evil. It is necessary. There's no question. We need to be able to have a government that we can maintain our society with. But is it a patriotic duty? No, it's something we should do. It's something we have to do, but it's not something that we should look forward to. And it's not something, giving more money to the government is never a good idea. I mean, there's infinite ideas of how they want to spend it, but there's finite amount of money. And the best place for that money is in the pockets of the people who earn it.
Because they have the right priorities in their mind. They know exactly what they need. They know what their family needs.
Right.
It's it's always bothered me that the fact that the way I always put it to my liberal friends, my liberal family members especially, I'm the one who's working 60 hours a week.
Right.
I bust my butt to produce results every single week.
Yeah.
And then when I get that paycheck and I see that a massive chunk of it just disappears like that.
Yep.
They didn't do that work.
Mm-mm.
I did that work.
Right.
My kids need food. My kids need, whatever
Education.
they need education. I need that money to help my family.
Right.
And the government takes it and just pisses it away on condoms to the Congo or whatever other USAID BS they were doing.
Right. Well, as with anything, I mean, the one thing that I think we should look at more closely is budgets, because a budget is a priority setting document. We have our priorities.
Great point.
Got to pay the mortgage, got to pay for food, got to pay for education, those type of things. Same thing at the government level. Look at the budget. What are their priorities? When you get to the limit of what we can afford on those priorities, the rest of them are no longer things that are necessary. They're wants, they're not needs. We have the same thing in each of our households. What are wants and what are needs? And unfortunately, we see, especially from the Democratic Party for time immemorial, is that a want becomes a need when they are able to declare it as such. And so they simply need to go get some more money in order to do it. So this big, beautiful bill, getting back to that, what it did is codify the huge tax cuts that were done during the Trump first administration, and the fact that those would have gone up significantly. I mean, again, more money would have been extracted from an economy that is right on the point of really being strong. I think once the interest rates go back down, once the tariffs are actually able to kick in, if the Supreme Court makes the right ruling after the federal court just struck them down, yesterday actually. Once all that happens, we will see the strength and the irresistibility of the American economy come up again. And I mean, there's a reason we're the model for the world, and especially as we see Europe and Asia and others just kind of continue to plod along and struggle, we will flourish. So
I think Secretary Burgum said it really well, and Vice President Vance even echoed it in the Midwest. We are well known for our work ethic here.
Yes.
And you make a really good point that this one big, beautiful bill has so many things in there that, in addition to the tariffs as well, but these things are helping our small businesses to be able to grow without being penalized. You said it very well earlier about that concept of let's not punish production.
Right.
Let's actually allow businesses to grow. And I think in conjunction with tariffs, especially where it's like, now we're bringing a lot of these jobs back to the United States, and we're saying we're going to penalize you if you do it overseas. We want those jobs here where we can prosper and help our families grow and our businesses grow with them. So I think that's a good point that we really need to spell out for people who are being lied to all the time in the press. That what is it? They're saying it's going to take people off of Medicaid. Yeah. No. The only people that's taking off Medicaid are the people who don't deserve it, like illegals.
Right, who aren't eligible for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, we're a very generous people, and we want to provide for those who cannot provide for themselves. But we also want to give them the tools and the ability to do so.
Yeah.
But you get to the point where the previous administrations have allowed tens of millions of people into this country.
Let's be clear. They have prioritized illegals over citizens.
Correct. Yeah.
Just like you were saying before, it's about priorities, and their priorities were for illegals.
Yes. And look at what's happening in London. Look what's happening in England. I mean, that's precisely, you have some declarations from their government who has basically been taken over by illegals in many instances, saying that providing for the illegal aliens that have come into their country is more important than their citizens. I mean,
so
it's
crazy.
Stunning what's going on over there. And unfortunately, I think that's exactly the direction they'd like to have the United States head. And we very easily could. I mean, the New York mayor will be an interesting test of just how far socialism and Marxism is able to go in this country with a uninformed and ignorant populace.
Well, and like we were saying earlier, that is the path that this Democrat Party is on. They are on the road towards a more tyrannical form and model in our country.
Yeah.
And it bothers me. It really does.
Excuse me. Yeah. The leaders certainly are taking us that direction.
Yes. Right. Good point.
Yeah. I mean, you and I still know Democrats here in this state and our friends and what have you, that even they are kind of wondering what's going on there, but they're so deranged by Trump that they're not paying attention to what's going on in their own party. So.
That is actually a really good point. And I want to reemphasize something that I've said a couple of times on this podcast, and that's for the real Democrats out there, the ones who do still love the country, there's room for them in the Republican Party.
Absolutely. You bet.
We have a wide variety of opinions in this party.
Yep.
And I mean, we welcome all people who love America here.
Absolutely. Or if that's just too far of a bridge to cross, then go back and reform your own party.
Or fix, great
I'm
point.
fine with that. Go fix the Democratic Party.
I don't know if it's fixable, though. I think they're going the way of the Whig Party.
But maybe that's a good reference. But I think it's possible in that there is still a counter view to what we believe, and we talked about that earlier in this podcast. We believe that it's personal responsibility, individual opportunities, things like that, and they believe that as a collective, we can provide more of the services that can help our society and move us further along. And that's and somewhere in between, we govern.
Yeah,
that's fine. But when you get to the point where it's all government all the time, and that's our religion, and that's essentially what we have with the Democrats right now, that becomes a significant problem.
Well said. Well said. All right. So one last piece I wanted to talk about with regard to this one big, beautiful bill. And I think this, to me, is one of the most exciting parts of this thing. This no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Is it no tax at all on Social Security now?
Yeah, I think there's, I don't remember if there's a means test, a certain level of, if you have, well, actually, you can't get really Social Security if you're getting more income. So yeah, I presume it's no tax on Social Security.
That's how I understood it, but I could be wrong about the details. But it is definitely exciting to see that, again, back to what we were saying, this is the Republican way of governing.
Yes.
This is people keeping the money that they earn, they deserve,
right?
Instead of the government taking it from them and going into some black hole bureaucracy. Speaking of that, we were talking about this a little bit too. DOGE and those efforts to reduce that massive footprint of the federal government that was never in the Constitution.
Never intended. Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And here's, again, going back to the fundamental lack of understanding of just basic economics as far as how this works. People who hear that we're not going to tax tips, we're not going to tax Social Security, they're like, well, how is the government going to live without that money? What's the government going to have to cut? What you don't understand, and what we have seen time and time and time again, is as you cut those taxes and you keep that money in the pockets of the people who earn it, they then go spend it. And that grows the economy. So let's say
it also increases revenue back to the government.
That's exactly where I was going. I mean, obviously, if you're taking, in Wisconsin, you're taking 5% on sales, right? 5% of sales. Well, if sales go much larger, you get 5% of a much larger piece of pie. So revenue increases at the state level as the economy grows. I mean, it's fundamental economics. It's something that is easy to demagogue and say, oh my gosh, we're going to have to cut, grandma from the nursing home if we don't tax people. No,
it's not.
There will
true.
be money there. There will be money there.
Well, and it reminds me too, bringing it down to like real day-to-day kinds of interactions and transactions. I was hesitant to buy a new truck a couple of years ago.
Sure.
Because it is just, I mean, let's be honest, I'm just getting soaked with taxes.
Right.
And can I afford a payment? Can I afford this? Because of all these other pressures on my paycheck.
Right.
When that frees up, now I could afford a truck.
Yep.
I go buy a new truck. Somebody's got to build that truck. If
Right.
I'm not buying that truck, those auto workers don't work.
Right.
Those car dealers don't work. The car washes don't work.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of the economy. When we as individuals have the money to utilize it, we utilize it in really smart ways that broaden out the economy and spread the wealth.
Absolutely. It goes back to the luxury tax of decades ago.
Right on.
That we used to have a pretty good boat building industry here. I mean, we were at the steel mill or steel fabricators where they built some of those boats. Skipperliner was a great.
Yeah, good point.
A luxury tax comes in. People start to realize that these are getting much more expensive. The Democrats are able to say, we're going to tax those rich when they buy those big old boats. And now suddenly we don't have Skipperliner anymore. We don't have the people who are building those boats anymore. It's again, just think it through for a second. Understand, I mean, the first reaction I think the Democrats would have had when you said, I didn't know if I could buy a new truck is, what do you need a new truck for? Your truck works fine. You don't need another new one. Stop it. Well, that's not their decision to make for me.
Right.
And number two, the people who are building those new trucks are saying, go build and buy a new truck. We're
Right.
comfortable with that. So
Yeah. No, it's such again, in this episode, I think with all these different philosophical, these fundamental differences that we have. And this is why we talk about this quite a bit. I talked about it with Dana Auer the other day as well. Common sense.
Mm-hmm.
We are the party of common sense.
Yeah.
These are the fundamental ideas that everybody understands. And it just bothers me so much that whether it's the corporate media or the Democrat Party elites, they just keep twisting the truth and creating these lies and manipulations.
Right.
And it's just, these are common sense issues that most people understand.
Yep. Yeah. It surprises me all the time that people are able to know so many people, to fool so many people on some of these issues that, again, going back to just that little statement of, boy, 11 million people are not going to have health care anymore. Well, 11 million people, 11 million, a great portion of those are illegal immigrants who weren't eligible in the first place. But you didn't say that. As a matter of fact,
and a good chunk of people in their 20s who are perfectly healthy, who are just on the public dole.
Right. They can even go so far as to say 11 million Americans won't have health care anymore. South America is America. So the Americans.
Good point.
Yeah,
they play all these word
right.
games.
You can say Americans won't have it. Yeah, that's true. The South Americans who shouldn't be here legally in the first place, they're going to be thrown off. That's true because we're sending them home. Yep.
I never thought about it. That's a good point. I mean, and that is honestly what they do. They take these little word games, and I mean that's why, like in my podcast on a weekly basis, I try to point out the most obvious versions of that in all of the stories. I mean, how many times have I said, hat tip Lacrosse Tribune for this story by the Marxists at Associated Press?
Yeah.
Because the way they word it, and I've got a couple of good ones for tomorrow's podcast to talk about these. It is so, once you identify the way they play these little word games, you can't unlearn it.
See it. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You start to see it, and it happens all the time. They are lying to us constantly.
Yep. All the time.
But no, that's a good point. That
it's just, you're right. I mean,
the bias is so
stunning.
obvious when you look for it, when you identify it.
Yeah. And you actually, like you said, once you're aware of it, you can't unsee it. It's like, oh, now I see it again. Otherwise you're really not paying attention to it. The Today Show, it's like you're watching the Today Show and they're like thick with bias. It's either East Coast bias or, it's political bias or whatever. And you're like, they're just going along until you realize it. And you're like, oh, wow, there's another one. There's another one. Boom, there's another one. It just constantly comes at you. So it's
all right.
Yes, Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg, how the two headlines in the same newspaper and the difference of how they were seen. Scalia is every bit a giant that Ginsburg was. As
absolutely
far as
brilliant.
Their rulings, and I mean, both were brilliant. I give them both credit, tremendous credit. But to suggest that one was evil and one was wonderful is you really only can get away with in the mainstream media.
And tell me if you don't want to go here. But it's something this morning that I saw in the Tribune, and it just the bias and the way that it's terrible. The editor of the opinion page printed a letter to the editor, and I don't even remember the name because it doesn't matter. They're just disgusting anti-Semite. This person basically said that Israel was committing genocide by starving the people of Gaza.
Mm-hmm. We've seen that.
100% false.
Right.
Not even close to being true.
Right.
But the editor of the opinion page put it out there. And now you're fueling even more anti-Semitic attitudes in our culture.
Yeah.
This is part of the problem.
Oh, no question.
These people in the media are irresponsible with their powers.
I don't disagree with that, but I would say that it goes back to the whole idea that if enough people are saying it, suddenly becomes true. And so this has been a narrative that has been building ever since the October 7th attack.
Yeah.
I mean, for what, a week, we were all appalled by that. And suddenly it was Israel's fault. And enough people started saying that, and enough people started believing that it's somehow this, it kind of goes back to, those few people, although this narrative never really caught on, but the few people who right in the wake of 9/11 were saying, well, this is deserved, the United States
We
deserves
asked
this.
for it,
Exactly.
kind of
This is something,
bullshit.
right. It's the
Sorry,
same,
guys.
it's that same type of thing that if you hear it from enough people, it's also why, and the fact that this is able to be printed and it continues to show up, because it's not the letter to the editor in La Crosse Tribune. We've heard that in mainstream media for the last 2 years. It's just pounded on us. But it is why I said in 2024, one of the biggest stories is the media finally put the nail in in the coffin of their own suicide. I mean, there's so many things you simply can't believe anymore in the mainstream media, especially at the national level, that I don't know. I don't understand why you continue to listen to it. So,
and that, like I said, in this concept of bias and everything, that really struck me this morning when I saw that. Usually these editors are much more responsible about that kind of stuff.
Right.
That was a flat out lie that they printed. And I remember writing letters to the editor back in the day when there was a different editor. I won't even use his name because it's not fair.
Yeah.
But he would call me out and challenge me about my facts.
Right.
If I had something that wasn't quite true, if I was maybe being a little hyperbolic in my language.
Yep.
That's fair.
Sure.
But they always print the lies of the left.
Well, we don't know the letters that they're
Good
not
point.
Getting through.
Good point. But this one definitely got through.
Yep.
And it was just so disgusting to me to fuel that kind of anti-Semitism that's going on.
If you really want to test that theory as to what the editor did, write the rebuttal. Write the rebuttal and send it in and say, I'm calling out this author and I'm calling out the editor for the lies that you've just printed.
Well, I was going to podcast about it. I don't know if I want to give them my content.
Well, after you podcast, just to test it, just to test your theory.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Whether or not they'll write or they'll send in something that shows that, hey, I believe your facts are wrong. I believe you've printed lies. Don't necessarily go tit for tat as far as the whole issue there, but just say this: what you've written and what you've allowed to be printed in your newspaper is not true. Is this going to be a pattern we're going to see?
I like that. That's a good point.
Here's a sample of what to expect in our next episode.
All right. Welcome back from the break. We were just talking about how do we want to wrap this one up, and essentially, like, I think you had a great point. What are the things that are coming up in the next episodes that we were going to keep our eye on to be ready to talk about?
Yeah, we've got some big issues on the horizon. Just yesterday, the Federal Appeals Court struck down all of the president's tariffs. That was not unexpected, especially in a D.C. court. That's, again, we could talk about the judiciary and what's happening in the judiciary.
Well, and just a refresher of what we were talking about previously is that this idea of a judicial oligarchy.
Yes.
Here we are again with the judicial branch of the government usurping power that they don't have. This is an Article 2 section of the Constitution that gives the president, I think it's emergency power.
Right, emergency power.
Right.
Exactly. And there is, defining emergency is an appropriate thing to do, and perhaps the courts are going to do that. But
and that would be their role.
Yes, and certainly their role. And arguably, you can look at that opinion that we got from the Federal Appeals Court and say, all right, they're questioning the emergency that exists. I would suggest that since we were getting beaten up by every other country in the world, that's an emergency that we need to correct. And the president has the ability to correct that error.
Well, and not only that, though, in my understanding of that, the way that the law was written, it's the opinion of the executive, the president anyway.
Right, in the opinion of the executive. Yeah.
So if it's his opinion, that's his opinion.
Right, exactly. So it's not unexpected this was going to be the next step as we eventually got to the Supreme Court. But as we move closer and closer, it will be that will be a significant issue we'll talk about.
Yeah, and it's going to have massive impacts because, like we were talking about before, that tariff program is one of the big reasons why more and more jobs are coming back to the United States.
Right, no question. Manufacturing will start here. If it doesn't cost as much to do the product or to make the product here, the manufacturing will come here. So we'll have that to discuss. Rebecca Bradley announced that she's not going to run for Supreme Court. Not unexpected completely. I think that she's had her fill of how political that court has become. And certainly now that it has become the rule of 4. I mean, really, as I've said many times, I would love to see the opinion that says from any justice, any judge that says, I don't really agree with this law. I don't think this is the way it should be,
Right.
but it is the law. And so I have to rule.
As a judge, I might not agree with this law, but this is the way it is. Legislature, take this back up and fix the law.
Right.
That's the legislature's job.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we learned that in 4th grade,
Right.
Apparently the judges have.
We learned it on Saturday morning cartoons with the little, how does a bill become a law?
Right. So, Rebecca Bradley not running is a huge blow to the conservative side of the Supreme Court, or what we would call the traditional side of the Supreme Court, those who are constitutionalists, who believe that, gee, maybe we should just interpret the Constitution the way it's written rather than the way we wish it had been written.
Mm-hmm.
But because we have a rule of 4 already, this, we already are in the minority. I think that as we sit here today, we've seen that we are woefully inadequate when we're willing to go after, when we are willing to recognize that Supreme Court justice races in Wisconsin have simply become governor's races.
Yeah.
It's no longer I'm planning to rule in the best way that I possibly, no. Tell me how you're going to rule on abortion. Tell me how you're going to rule on redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how you're going to rule on murder and all these other types of things, because that's the way the pattern has been set.
Something just occurred to me. At the event the other day, I was able to have a nice chat with Chairman Schimming,
Mm-hmm.
and he loves the idea of coming to the speakeasy and having a conversation.
Right.
Would you want to have like a
Sure.
conversation with him as well? Maybe we can talk about how we can make sure that we keep Wisconsin instead of turning it into Minnesota.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, we can't turn into Minnesota. My goodness.
I know, it's crazy.
That's insane.
But we're
what's going
heading
on
in that
there.
direction,
We are.
unfortunately.
I completely agree. Actually, we should have talked about the voter fraud in Minnesota that struck down the mayor's race in Minneapolis. I don't know if you saw this.
I missed that one.
Oh, there was a Somali guy who has been running for mayor in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And the mayor in Minneapolis currently embraced that population. Obviously, they have Ilhan Omar. It's a big Somali
Mm-hmm.
population over there, and so the Farm Labor Committee or Democrat Farm Labor Party got together. They were going to endorse for the Minneapolis mayor, and they endorsed this Somali guy over the sitting Minneapolis mayor, which was disappointing to the obviously Minneapolis mayor. Like, hey, I embraced you guys, and now you're turning back on me. But the Somalis are really, flexing their might and their power over there with the sheer numbers they have. Well, the DFL just struck down the results because they found out in the endorsement process in the party there was rampant fraud as far as the voting. And as it's been stated,
Wait. Democrats?
Yes.
Committing fraud?
Right, exactly.
In an election?
Right.
No.
Well, here's the obvious thing is, like, if you're willing to commit fraud against other Democrats, what do you think they're willing to do against us? My goodness.
We have known this forever.
Right.
They've been perfecting it here in Wisconsin.
Precisely. Yeah. So
Crazy.
there was ballot stuffing. There was all kinds of activity that went into that one. So
But they actually called it out this
called
time.
it out. Yeah. Well, the party called it out and said, all right, we have to strike down the results of this. because
Fascinating.
There was obvious fraud. So my God, if we become Minnesota, it's going to be a problem. You know what? It'll be our fault. Because again, I go back to the fact time and time again, I will say it, we get the government we deserve.
Yeah.
And
that's one of the reasons why every week on my weekly podcast, I remind everybody in November when we reelected Trump to the presidency, that was only the first step to make America great. It really takes a commitment and an ongoing effort to stay engaged in these elections.
Right.
We can't just sit on our laurels. You can't sit on our couch. We have to be engaged because the enemies of this country, the Ilhan Omars and these Marxists in the elite positions of the Democrat Party, they are always on the move.
Always. They don't seem to rest. So, and we'll have interesting tests of those in 2026. In the spring, we'll elect a new Supreme Court justice. Will those Trump voters, those who want to make America great again, will they show up? Because it has been shown that they don't always show up unless Trump's on the ballot.
Last spring was a perfect example.
Exactly right.
We were very disappointed in the turnout.
Absolutely, and got crushed. So if the MAGA voters do not show up, then the liberals will take over.
Yep.
And in the same sense, then November of next year for governor. So we have 2 enormous races next year that we can discuss more as we go further into the season.
Right
so
on.
we got lots of things to talk about coming.
This is, and I've said this a couple of different times on the podcast, this election cycle is going to be super exciting.
Yes.
And by exciting, I mean like nerve-wracking and gut-wrenching, but it's going to be so much hard work. And I think people like you helping out with this. Mike, thank you so much for being here again.
My
This
pleasure,
has
Chris.
been so much fun talking through these issues and helping everyone understand, like, on the ground, what does it mean to you when these policies get enacted? So thank you so much for the time.
Happy to be here. Look forward to next time.
I want you